Hey everybody, we are the Gold Diggers, and this is our leader comparison project comparing the leadership styles of Adolf Hitler and Nelson Mandela.
For our leadership comparison project, we will be comparing the leadership styles of dictator Adolf Hitler and activist Nelson Mandela. Adolf Hitler and Nelson Mandela are considered two significant and famous political leaders whose actions have made important changes in the history of mankind. They exhibit enormous differences when it comes to leadership, attitudes, and principles. However, their actions moved their country their way, whether it was for good or bad. With their different styles of leadership, they were able to motivate their people to fight for their cause, and they both shaped the course of history for better or for worse. Mandela was born Zoli Shasha Mandela on July 18, 1918, in a tiny village in South Africa. Mandela became the first to receive a formal education in his family. As a common practice, African students were given English names by their teachers. This is when Zoli Shasha Mandela became Nelson Mandela. At the age of 16, Mandela heard a speech about the plight of young men enslaved in their own country because their land was controlled by white men. The speaker also told of how the young men would struggle to make a living while performing mindless chores. These words created the foundation for Nelson Mandela's strong belief in fairness and his fight for an independent South Africa. Nelson Mandela became actively involved with the anti-apartheid movement and joined the African National Congress. Mandela helped lead the campaign for defiance of unjust laws. It was a non-violent campaign until police fired upon a peaceful group of black protesters. Mandela decided it was time to set aside the passive resistance and go with a more radical approach, saying it would be wrong and unrealistic for African leaders to continue preaching peace and nonviolence at a time when the government met our peaceful demands with force. In 1963, Mandela was sentenced to life in prison for sabotage, treason, and conspiracy to overthrow the government. His reputation for black resistance garnered international support for his release. He was offered early release in exchange to end his protests once released, but he refused to make concessions to injustice. After 27 years and the election of a new president in South Africa, Nelson Mandela was released from prison in 1990. When Mandela was released from prison, he worked with President de Klerk to put an end to apartheid. This gesture earned Mandela the Nobel Peace Prize in 1993. When South Africa was allowed to have its first democratic election, Nelson Mandela was elected the first black president of South Africa. As president, he created the Truth and Reconciliation Commission to investigate human rights and political violations committed by both supporters and opponents of apartheid. Mandela remained a supporter of peace and social injustice until the day he died on December 5, 2013. In honor of his commitment to fairness and justice for all, Mandela's birthday was declared Mandela Day, which is an international day to promote global peace and celebrate Mandela's legacy. Nelson Mandela will forever be a symbol of international peacemaking. Adolf Hitler was born on April 20, 1889, in a small Austrian town. His father worked as a civil servant, but growing up, Hitler showed little interest in wanting to follow in his father's footsteps. Hitler had a passion for painting, for which his father did not approve. After the death of his parents, Hitler relocated to Vienna in 1907 to pursue his dream of becoming an artist. Hitler applied to Vienna's Academy of Fine Arts but was rejected twice. He was barely able to support himself by selling his paintings and doing casual labor, which only afforded him a place to stay in homeless shelters. Hitler became interested in politics during this time, and he has said that it was during these years when he first cultivated his anti-Semitic ideas that would become the ideals of the Nazi Party. Hitler became a fanatic of German nationalism. He left Vienna and moved to Munich, enlisting in the German army when World War I began. Fighting in this war in which he was wounded, Hitler earned 2 decorations for bravery, the Black Wound Badge and the Iron Cross First Class. While recovering from his wounds, he received word of Germany's defeat. Hitler was convinced the defeat was due to the betrayal by civilian leaders. This belief led Hitler to quit the German army and join the Nazi Party, which was created to unite the interests of the working class with strong German nationalism. Hitler assumed the propaganda efforts for the party and created the swastika symbol, which remains a potent symbol of racial hate to this day. Hitler quickly rose through the ranks, becoming the head of the Nazi Party. In 1932, Hitler ran for president against Paul von Hindenburg but was defeated. Due to political instability following the election, the president appointed Hitler to be chancellor. He quickly used his position to gain absolute power in Germany. By 1933, Hitler's Nazi Party was declared the only legal political party in Germany. Under his leadership, many laws and regulations were implemented to disenfranchise the Jewish people. His policies also targeted children with physical and developmental disabilities, along with homosexuals. Hitler went so far as to authorize a euthanasia program for the disabled elderly. In 1939, Germany invaded Poland, marking the beginning of World War II, which lasted for 6 years. On April 29, 1945, after succeeding to the fact that Germany would be defeated, Hitler committed suicide. He can be held responsible for the deaths of tens of millions of people. Included in this number is about 6 million Jews that died due to Hitler's act of genocide, which today is known as the Holocaust.
When comparing the leadership styles of Adolf Hitler and Nelson Mandela, we used the modern leadership theory of authentic leadership to explain each leader's level of effectiveness. 4 components form the foundation for a theory of authentic leadership: self-awareness, internalized moral perspective, balanced processing, and relational transparency. Self-awareness refers to the personal insights of a leader and includes reflecting on one's core values, identity, emotions, motives, and goals. Nelson Mandela was an icon of democracy and social justice who stuck by his values no matter the price. He took a strong stance on human rights and helped bring an end to apartheid in South Africa, which was a system of segregation on grounds of race. This system restricted non-whites' basic rights and barred them from government while maintaining white minority rule. Acting on his values, he led peaceful protest and armed resistance against the white minority's oppressive regime in a racially divided South Africa. Although his actions resulted in imprisonment for 3 decades, he fought unwaveringly for his goal of peace and social justice. Adolf Hitler, on the other hand, was obsessed with race and the idea of ethnic purity. While Mandela was an icon of democracy, Hitler believed that the Germans would be best united by one supreme leader. Hitler began his idea of ethnic purity by depriving Jews of German citizenship and barring them from marrying or having relations with Germans. He later held Jews in concentration camps only to eventually begin exterminating them, killing around 6 million by the end of the war. Internalized moral perspective refers to a self-regulatory process whereby individuals use their internal moral standards and values to guide their behavior rather than allow outside pressures to control them. Nelson Mandela, without a doubt, used his internal moral standards and values to guide his behavior, as he fought his entire life for peace and social justice in South Africa and around the world, despite resistance and imprisonment. The government even offered Mandela his freedom in exchange for political compromises, asking that he renounce violence and recognize the policies put into place. Not allowing these pressures to control him, he stuck to his moral standards and values and rejected the deals. Adolf Hitler, however, did not possess internal moral standards, as he was a ruthless dictator responsible for the death of nearly 6 million Jews. These actions were a result of the value he placed on ethnic purity and his nationalistic, anti-Semitic views. He did not allow outside pressures to control him, as he was the supreme leader and acted on his own ruthless agenda. Balanced processing refers to an individual's ability to analyze information objectively and explore other people's opinions before making a decision. It also means avoiding favoritism about certain issues and remaining unbiased. As president of South Africa, Nelson Mandela's agenda consisted of improving race relations, discouraging blacks from retaliating against the white minority, and building a new international image of a united South Africa. He proclaimed the country to be a rainbow nation at peace with itself and the world, proving that he avoided favoritism and looked out for the best interest of everyone when making decisions. Adolf Hitler was the complete opposite in terms of avoiding favoritism and remaining unbiased, as he was obsessed with the pursuit of Aryan supremacy and the idea of ethnic purity. He did not explore people's opinions before making decisions, as he believed the German people should be unified under the rule of one supreme leader. Hitler's actions earned him the title of one of the most powerful and notorious dictators of all time. Relational transparency refers to being open and honest and presenting one's true self to others. It occurs when individuals share their core feelings, motives, and inclinations with others in an appropriate manner. Nelson Mandela was very open and honest in presenting his true self to others, stating, "I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society in which all persons live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. It is an ideal which I hope to live for and to achieve, but if needs be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die." Sharing his feelings, motives, and inclinations with others led him to win a Nobel Peace Prize in December of 1993 and to be sworn in as the first black president of South Africa on May 10, 1994. On the opposite end of being open and honest, Adolf Hitler claimed that Germany supported disarmament and peace, even though the domination and expansion of the Volk, also known as the German people, remained his overriding aim. The following year, he withdrew Germany from the League of Nations and began to militarize the nation in anticipation of his plans for territorial conquest. Nelson Mandela was such a great and inspirational leader that in 2009, the United Nations declared July 18th Nelson Mandela International Day in recognition of his contributions to democracy, freedom, peace, and human rights around the world. On the other hand, Adolf Hitler was one of the most powerful dictators of the 20th century, responsible for the murder of 6 million people following his belief in one supreme leader and one supreme race. With leadership comes great power, and the effect that these two leaders had on others is staggering on both ends of the spectrum.
Ethical theories generally fall into two categories: theories of conduct, the actions of the leader, or theories of character, who they are as people. Two parts of the theories of conduct is ethical egoism and altruism. Hitler would be described as acting within ethical egoism, always acting with a high level of self-interest, while Mandela consistently acted with a high level of concern for others, or acting with altruism. Hitler claimed he was acting for the betterment of Germany. However, he led based on his own beliefs and in a manner in which made him look better and feel better about himself. He had an extremely negative impact on many people and countries throughout the world, including the normal citizens of Germany who he was originally claiming to help. Mandela seemed to have a very self-sacrificing attitude. He was constantly driving for and making actions towards having equality for all people in South Africa and throughout the world. Mandela spent many years of his life in jail because he wasn't willing to compromise on his beliefs and the people that he cared about. Within ethical leadership, we also used destructive leadership to compare the lack of ethics in Hitler's leadership style. He was a very charismatic person and was able to convince a nation to follow him even if the beliefs weren't what they would normally feel. To Hitler, leadership was very personal. He used his past experiences to create his path forward. He also punished people based on how he felt about certain subjects. Hitler was certainly a narcissist. He wanted things done his way, making sure uniforms were all the same, people saluted in the same way, his appearance was always the same no matter where he was in the world. He led his country out of hatred ideals. He hated people that were non-Aryan, punishing innocent people based on this blind hatred. Compared to the destructive leadership style of Hitler, Mandela highlighted all 5 principles of ethical leadership: builds community, respects others, serves others, shows justice, and manifests honesty. His actions as a whole were taken with his country, South Africa, always in mind. He wanted equality for all and was willing to work towards that for his entire life. He was an open and honest leader who treated others with respect based on the things that they had done in the past.
Path goal leadership theory is specifically centered around how leaders motivate followers and help followers overcome obstacles that may be in the way of reaching a goal, all while improving performance and satisfaction. There are 3 components that play into motivating followers within the path goal theory: follower characteristics, task characteristics, and leader behaviors. Depending on what followers demand and the environment the followers are in, leaders choose how to react to best satisfy the 2 factors. To be effective, leaders need to help followers by giving them what is missing in their environments and by helping them compensate for deficiencies in their abilities. Nelson Mandela was known as being a champion of the people, relentlessly working against segregation and degradation brought on by the apartheid to promote justice and freedom for all South Africans. He understood the goal of the people who had no voice or motivation to move forward and did his best to fill the niche, falling into a leadership position in the process. Mandela most notably portrayed supportive and participative leadership behaviors characteristics towards his followers to try to satisfy their motivational needs. Supportive leaders, such as Mandela, are approachable and concerned with the well-being of their followers, placing equality in high regard. In Mandela, supportive leadership could be seen through his meteoric rise to presidency and daily operations afterwards, pushing multicultural democracy and socialist tendencies that eroded disparity lines between varying communities. Participative leaders respect and take opinions of the followers into account when making decisions. This could be seen in Mandela through his encouragement of democracy and the need to have his followers heard through this political system. He believed that the unity among followers could only be found in giving them an equal say. The apartheid in South Africa left Mandela's eventual followers in an unstructured environment with an unclear future. seeking the need for affiliation and unity. Being supportive and participative in nature helped Mandela excel in the eyes of his followers and the world, providing the amount of nurturing and involvement necessary to catapult his country towards an age of progression. Nelson Mandela was effective in motivating followers through the path goal theory because he was able to match his two leadership behaviors to follower and task characteristics, assisting followers in reaching their own goals of equality and a greater life. Adolf Hitler was a notorious dictator who fell on the opposite end of the spectrum as Nelson Mandela regarding racism, recklessly expounding on differences among people based on their culture and appearance whenever he got the chance. Through fear-mongering and manipulation, he projected his own agenda onto his followers, making them believe his goals were their own instead of actually focusing on their needs. To motivate his followers, Hitler employed two separate leader behaviors to help them reach their pseudo-demands: directive and achievement-oriented leadership. Directive leadership describes a leader who tells followers about every aspect of the path to reach their goal. This would perfectly describe Hitler in the position of Germany's dictator, as he would focus on giving followers only one way to go about completing a task or face harsh consequences if they objected. A leader who is achievement-oriented pushes their followers to always work at their highest potential. Hitler desired excellence in each of his followers and did not accept anything less. In fact, he died in the supremely arrogant belief that the German people had failed him. They had not proved worthy of his greatness. Having risen to power when Germany and its economy were in shambles after World War I, Hitler was able to take advantage of the need to excel and authoritarian characteristics of followers in an uncertain environment through the use of directive and achievement-oriented behaviors. However, he did so under false pretenses, having manipulated followers to believe the only way out of Germany's disarray was through a wide variety of unethical measures that ultimately resulted in a strong dictatorship for himself. Hitler clearly did not concern himself with the goals of his followers nor their satisfaction. He only held close interest in areas that threatened his power. Because of this, he was not a successful leader according to the path goal theory.
While both could be considered effective leaders, Adolf Hitler and Nelson Mandela had two very different approaches to leadership. Their thought processes with regards to their followers and how those around them were impacted by their decision-making are clearly seen and can be compared using multiple leadership theories. Mandela can be quoted saying, "For to be free is not merely to cast off one's chains, but to live in a way that respects and enhances the freedom of others." Adolf Hitler can be quoted saying, "Humanitarianism is the expression of stupidity and cowardice." Worldwide societal lessons were learned from the actions of both leaders, and each played an integral part in history, for better or for worse.